The Thalian Emergency Council chamber fell silent as the human transmission played again. Ambassador Liran adjusted his translator implant, wondering if he had misunderstood. The message remained the same. "We're on our way. Hold tight." "They cannot be serious," Elder Sorith said, her luminescent skin pulsing with doubt. "Earth is 17 light-years from our nearest outpost. By the time they arrive, we will be nothing but history and ashes." Liran studied the transmission metrics. This message came through a direct quantum channel. "They've already departed." The council erupted in whispers. Quantum communication technology was rare even among the elder species. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely a century into faster-than-light travel. Their sudden technological prowess made no sense. Outside the chamber windows, the first Vokhthar scout ships appeared as distant silver specks against Thalia's lavender sky. They had perhaps 3 days before the main fleet arrived. "Show me everything we have on humans," Liran requested. The central display filled with images, towering cities beside pristine wilderness reserves, humans in environmental suits restoring damaged ecosystems, medical teams treating alien species in frontier outposts. But deeper in the archives, Liran found older records, humans in primitive battle gear, their planet scarred by wars, their history stained with blood. They were violent once, noted science director Vela. Perhaps still are. They protected each other, Liran countered, pointing to images of human medics rushing into danger zones. And now they come to protect us. The council chamber doors opened as Nareen, the youngest member of the diplomatic corps, rushed in. "Ambassador, we're receiving thousands of transmissions from Earth, not just from their government, from their citizens." The display changed to show messages from across human territories. "We stand with Thalia. Hang on, help is coming. We're collecting supplies for your refugees." A social media trend showed human children holding hand-drawn pictures of Thalians with the hashtag #SpaceFriends. Universities offered scholarships to displaced Thalian youth. Religious organizations prepared sanctuaries. Private companies diverted spacecraft for evacuation assistance. "I don't understand," Elder Sorith whispered. "They have nothing to gain. We have no strategic value, no rare resources they need." Liran watched a video of humans loading medical supplies onto transport ships, working through their night cycle without rest. Perhaps that's why they come, not for what they can take, but for what they can give. The central display chimed with a priority alert. A massive energy signature had appeared at the edge of the system. The Vokhthar main fleet had arrived early. The council members froze in despair. Then another alert. Unexpected wormhole formations detected near the system's outer asteroid belt. Irregular energy signatures, non-standard approach vectors. "Is it another enemy?" Vela asked, voice trembling. The tactical display clarified the readings. 15 ships of various configurations, bearing Earth identification markers, moving at speeds that strained the limits of their apparent technology. They had somehow crossed 17 light-years in less than 3 days. How did they manage this? Sorith breathed. The answer came in a new transmission, the voice of a human female, steady and determined. "Thalian friends, this is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Emergency Response Fleet. We borrowed some experimental drive systems and broke a few speed regulations to get here. Sorry about dropping in unannounced. We've analyzed the Vokhthar fleet composition and have a plan. Permission to enter your system and coordinate defense operations." For the first time since the crisis began, Ambassador Liran felt something beyond fear. It wasn't quite hope. Not yet, but its distant cousin, possibility. "Permission granted, Captain Rodriguez," he replied, straightening his posture as the council watched in amazement. "Welcome to Thalia. We are most grateful that you answered our call." Captain Rodriguez walked alongside High Counselor Venera through the botanical gardens of Thalia's capital city. The air smelled of sweet pollen and mineral-rich soil. Overhead, the iridescent dome filtered the harsh rays of their binary stars into a gentle amber glow. "Your world is beautiful," Rodriguez said, stopping to examine a floating blossom that changed colors as it detected her proximity. "It will not remain so if the Vokthar have their way," Venra replied. "Their strip mining operations have left dozens of worlds barren. They harvest resources until nothing remains, then move on." Rodriguez nodded. "We encountered similar attitudes back in our history. We learned from them, eventually." She paused as her communication device buzzed. Commander Chen's holographic image appeared above her wrist. "Captain, the Vokthar have deployed scanning drones throughout the system. They're mapping Thalian defense installations." "They won't find many," Venra said quietly. "Our security forces are equipped only for civil emergencies and minor disputes." Rodriguez dismissed the hologram with a flick of her wrist. "This garden, what purpose does it serve?" Venra seemed surprised by the question. "It houses botanical specimens from across our system. Some have medicinal properties, others produce nutrients or oxygen. Many are simply preserved for their beauty. Multi-purpose, adaptable, resilient." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Just like this entire complex, I'd wager." For the first time, Venra looked at his own city with new eyes. The sweeping architecture of the governmental complex served not just as administrative centers, but as community gathering spaces. The weather regulation systems that maintained the perfect climate could be repurposed. The underground transport network connecting population centers could be converted to evacuation routes. "You see potential weapons in our peaceful infrastructure," Venra observed, his voice a mixture of horror and fascination. Rodriguez shook her head. "Not weapons. Advantages. My species learned to survive by using everything available to us. Sometimes that meant fighting, but more often it meant adapting." They reached a viewing platform overlooking the landing field where human shuttles continued to arrive, bringing specialists and equipment. Thalian civilians gathered at the edges, watching with uncertain expressions. "Your people fear us," Rodriguez noted. "They fear what your presence means," Venra corrected. "For millennia, we believed peaceful cooperation was the natural evolution of all intelligent life. Your arrival challenges that belief. If some species remain aggressive like the Vokthar, and others remain passive like us, where do humans fit?" Rodriguez considered this as she watched a group of human engineers unpacking equipment. A small Thalian child approached them cautiously, holding out a container of local fruit. After a moment's hesitation, one of the engineers accepted the offering with an elaborate bow that made the child giggle. Soon more children gathered, fascinated by the newcomers. "We fit wherever we're needed," Rodriguez finally answered. "Humans are adaptable that way." A deafening boom interrupted them as the sky flashed brilliant white. Anti-orbital weaponry had been deployed from the Vokthar fleet, targeting one of Thalia's outer orbital stations. The garden's protective dome darkened automatically, filtering the glare. Rodriguez's communication device erupted with urgent reports. The Vokthar had destroyed a scientific outpost housing 50 researchers. A declaration of intent, not a strategic strike. "They're forcing our hand," she muttered, then turned to Venra with fierce determination. "High Counselor, my diplomatic overtures have been ignored. The Vokthar believe you defenseless, and us inconsequential. I need your permission to show them their mistake." Venra watched as the human soldiers below rapidly mobilized, their earlier friendliness replaced by grim efficiency. The Thalian children were quickly but gently ushered away from the landing zone. In that moment, he understood what humans truly offered, not just protection, but instruction in the art of surviving in a universe less peaceful than the Thalians had hoped. "Permission granted, Captain," he said quietly. "What do you require of us?" Commander Wei Chen stood in the center of the repurposed concert hall, now serving as humanity's impromptu war room. Holographic displays projected the Thalian system in stunning detail above the stage, where symphonies had once played. Thalian scientists worked alongside human tacticians, their earlier hesitation replaced by focused urgency. "The asteroid belt's electromagnetic properties are perfect for what we need," Chen explained, manipulating the hologram to highlight a dense cluster of space rocks. We can use your gravitational harmonizers to create unpredictable flight paths through this sector. Dr. Nima Varel, Thalia's foremost atmospheric scientist, frowned. Those harmonizers maintain our weather patterns. Repurposing them would cause significant climate disruption. Chen nodded respectfully. How long before weather patterns become irrelevant if the Vakthar land on your surface? A murmur passed through the assembled Thalians. Varel straightened her posture. 3 days. We can stabilize the atmosphere for 3 days without the harmonizers. That's all we need, Chen assured her. After that, they either retreat or weather will be the least of our concerns. Across the hall, Dr. Samira Kapoor worked with Thalian engineers to modify agricultural soil enrichment drones. Her hands moved deftly, rewiring the small hovering devices as she explained her vision. These can be converted to deliver electromagnetic pulses instead of nutrients, she demonstrated, carefully replacing a dispersal module with components from human communication equipment. The Vakthar ships use neural interfaces to enhance pilot reaction time. These pulses won't destroy their ships, but they'll disorient their crews long enough for our fighters to gain advantage. A young Thalian engineer named Kiran watched in fascination. We designed these to nurture life, not disrupt it. Kapoor paused, her dark eyes meeting his. Sometimes protecting life requires uncomfortable choices. My great-grandmother was a pacifist who became a medic during Earth's resource wars. She saved lives by adapting her skills to a reality she never wanted. Outside the concert hall, training grounds had been established where human soldiers taught basic defensive tactics to Thalian volunteers. The Thalians lacked natural aggression, making combat training challenging, until Lieutenant Alvarez discovered their protective instincts. Don't think about harming the enemy, she instructed a group struggling with hand-to-hand techniques. Think about shielding someone behind you. When paired and asked to protect their partners, the Thalians' movements became fluid and effective. What they couldn't do from aggression, they accomplished through protection. As twilight approached, Captain Rodriguez and High Counselor Venra received increasingly alarming reports. The Vakthar fleet had deployed into attack formation. Their ultimatum demanded Thalian surrender within 12 hours. In the concert hall, Chen gathered everyone for a final briefing. The beautiful ceiling mural depicting Thalia's constellations looked down upon this unexpected assembly. Scientists becoming warriors, artists becoming strategists, pacifists preparing for conflict. Our plan relies on surprise and unconventional tactics, Chen explained. The Vakthar expect either surrender or a conventional defense they can easily overcome. They don't understand what they're facing. A nervous Thalian asked, "What exactly are they facing?" Chen smiled grimly. Humans who crossed 17 light-years to protect strangers, and Thalians who are braver than anyone, including yourselves, ever realized. As the meeting concluded, Rodriguez took a moment alone with Venra on the concert hall's balcony. The twin moons of Thalia cast silver light across the city below, where families prepared for potential evacuation. Your people learned quickly, she observed. Necessity creates strange transformations, Venra replied. I worry what we might become through this conflict. Rodriguez watched as human and Thalian children played in a nearby square, somehow finding joy despite the circumstances. A human girl was teaching Thalian youngsters to play hopscotch, the ancient Earth game adapted to accommodate their different physiologies. Look there, she said softly. That's what we're fighting for. The chance to stay ourselves, to share our differences, to play games instead of waging war. Sometimes you have to fight precisely so fighting doesn't become who you are. The first warning sirens began to sound. The Vakthar had accelerated their timeline. The attack was coming. It's time, Rodriguez said, straightening her uniform. Let's show them what happens when you threaten a world under human protection. Lieutenant Sophia Rice piloted her retrofitted science vessel through the chaos of battle, the ship's engines straining as she executed maneuvers that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Behind her, 2 Vakthar pursuit craft followed, their weapons systems targeting her vulnerable engine housing. "Come on, take the bait," she muttered, diving toward the modified asteroid field, where the Thalian gravitational harmonizers had created an invisible maze of conflicting forces. "Rise, you've got 3 more hostiles approaching from Sector 6, came the calm voice of her Thalian co-pilot, Elin. 2 weeks ago, he had been cataloging stellar phenomena. Now he monitored combat sensors with remarkable composure. "Perfect." Reyes grinned, throwing the ship into a spiraling descent between 2 massive asteroids. "Tell Dr. Varl to activate Sequence 3 on my mark." The pursuing Vakthar ships followed, their superior propulsion systems closing the gap. What they couldn't know was that their pursuit had been calculated to the second. As Reyes' ship cleared the asteroid field, Elin sent the signal. "Mark." Instantly, the harmonizers reversed their gravitational fields. The massive asteroids suddenly attracted rather than repelled each other, creating a crushing zone exactly where the Vakthar ships now flew. 2 were instantly pulverized. The third managed a desperate course correction, only to collide with a 4th vessel arriving as reinforcement. Across the system, similar scenes unfolded as human ingenuity combined with Thalian technology. Modified agricultural drones swarmed around Vakthar dreadnoughts, their electromagnetic pulses disrupting the neural interfaces of enemy pilots. Suddenly deprived of their enhanced reaction times, the Vakthar found themselves vulnerable to attacks from smaller, more maneuverable human vessels. On the bridge of the retrofitted cargo freighter serving as their command center, Captain Rodriguez tracked the battle alongside Commander Chen. Holographic displays showed Vakthar ships in disarray, their formation broken by tactics they had never encountered. "Atmospheric team reports success," Chen announced as data streamed in. "Dr. Kapoor's modification to the weather control satellites has created electromagnetic storms in the upper atmosphere. Vakthar landing craft can't penetrate to the surface." Rodriguez nodded, but her expression remained grim. "We've bloodied their nose, but this is just the beginning. Status report on our losses. 4 vessels destroyed. 67 personnel." Chen hesitated. "We don't know how many survived." The bridge fell silent. Every human on this mission had volunteered, knowing the odds against them. Every loss hit hard. A communication alert broke the moment. The Vakthar commander was broadcasting on all frequencies. His angular face appeared on the main screen, mandibles clicking in barely controlled rage. "What manner of deception is this?" he demanded. "The Thalians are a non-combatant species with no military capability. Identify yourselves." Rodriguez stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her fatigue. "I am Captain Maya Rodriguez of Earth. The Thalians are under our protection." The Vakthar commander's compound eyes narrowed. "Earth? Your world is barely known to us. Your technology is primitive. Your ships are inadequate. How have you managed this resistance?" "We're human," Rodriguez replied simply. "We've spent our entire history turning disadvantages into strengths. Your ships might be more advanced, but our pilots grew up navigating hurricane winds and treacherous mountain passes. Your weapons might be more powerful, but we've learned to strike precisely where it matters most." She leaned closer to the screen. "And most importantly, we evolved on a world where everything, from microbes to megafauna, tried to kill us daily. We call it Earth. Retreat now, or discover what that means." The transmission ended abruptly. On the bridge, a young Thalian liaison whispered to Chen, "Do all humans speak with such confidence against overwhelming odds?" Chen's weary smile held pride and sorrow in equal measure. Only the ones who volunteered for suicide missions across 17 light years to protect strangers. He turned back to the tactical display. "They're regrouping. The real test begins now." Rodriguez studied the enemy fleet's movements, already anticipating their next strategy. "Prepare Phase 2, she ordered. "They won't underestimate us twice." Dr. Lena Nazari studied the psychological profiles of captured Vakthar crew members with fascination. She had spent years analyzing alien cognitive patterns, but the Vakthar represented something unique. The 3 prisoners sat in comfortable quarters rather than cells, a decision that clearly unsettled them more than restraints would have. Their entire society functions on dominance hierarchies, she explained to Rodriguez and Venra. They literally cannot comprehend why we would treat prisoners with dignity. Rodriguez frowned. Can we use that to our advantage? We already are, Nazari smiled. Every time we bring them meals without demanding information, every medical treatment we provide without extracting payment, it disrupts their worldview. They're waiting for the trap to spring, but there isn't one. Venera studied the monitor showing the Vakthar quarters. One prisoner was examining the gift left by Thalian children, a small sculpture representing unity among different species. His clawed fingers traced the figures with unexpected gentleness. Even predators can learn new behaviors, Nazari observed. Outside the diplomatic complex, the signs of Earth's reinforcements were everywhere. Admiral Okonkwo's fleet had arrived with proper warships and weapons systems designed specifically to counter Vakthar technology. More surprising were the civilian vessels, hospital ships, construction platforms, and terraforming equipment. You prepared for more than just fighting, Venra noted as he walked with Rodriguez through a newly established field hospital where human and Thalian medical personnel treated wounded from both sides. Earth sent what we asked for, Rodriguez replied. I asked for everything. A commotion near the hospital entrance drew their attention. A group of Thalian children had arrived with handmade gifts for the patients. Among them walked the youngest daughter of High Counselor Venra, carefully carrying a musical instrument. Mira insisted on bringing her tone flute, Venra explained, emotion evident in his voice. She believes music heals better than medicine. They watched as the girl approached a bed where a human pilot lay recovering from severe burns. Her delicate fingers began playing a Thalian melody that seemed to ripple through the air like water. The human's pained expression softened as the notes washed over him. She might be right, Rodriguez said softly. Their moment of peace was interrupted by an urgent communication. Admiral Okonkwo's holographic figure appeared before them, his expression grave. The Vakthar main fleet has arrived, he reported, 3 times the size of the initial force. They're deploying planet-killer platforms at the system's edge. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. How long do we have? 6 hours until they're in firing position, Okonkwo replied. I've positioned our fleet to intercept, but even with our modifications, we're outgunned. Venera looked stricken. You cannot sacrifice yourselves for us. That's not the plan, came Nazari's calm voice as she joined them. The diplomatic channel is open. The Vakthar Supreme Commander has agreed to receive our transmission in 1 hour. Rodriguez turned to her in surprise. How did you manage that? I sent him the psychological profiles of his captured warriors, Nazari explained. Specifically, the changes in their neural patterns after experiencing compassion rather than domination. I suggested these findings might be of strategic interest. A slow smile spread across Rodriguez's face. Clever. What's your strategy for the actual dialogue? Nazari's expression remained serious. The truth. We show them everything. The hospital treating their wounded, the children bringing gifts, the captured warriors experiencing a society based on cooperation rather than domination. And if they see only weakness to exploit? Venra asked. Then we introduce them to Earth's less compassionate capabilities, Admiral Okonkwo interjected, his hologram displaying tactical readouts of weapons systems that had remained dormant until now. We've held back our full military technology, hoping diplomacy might prevail. Rodriguez checked the time. 1 hour to prepare our case for peace, with extinction as the alternative. She turned to Nazari. What do you need from us? Bring the Vakthar prisoners, Nazari replied. And Mira with her tone flute. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are the ones that change hearts rather than end lives. As they departed to prepare, the hospital's communication system broadcast an urgent message. 3 more vessels had entered the system. bearing markings from previously neutral species. But instead of joining the Vakthar Armada, they positioned themselves with the human fleet. The unexpected allies had arrived. The Ardani diplomatic vessel Celestial Harmony glided through space alongside ships from the Moravian Consortium and the Jexel Empire. Ambassador Trelvor of the Ardani stood on the observation deck, watching the Thalian system grow larger through the viewport. Behind him, representatives from a dozen previously neutral species engaged in heated debate. The humans have no authority to intervene in this conflict, argued the Moravian delegate, a tall crystalline being whose faceted body reflected the starlight. Yet they crossed multiple territorial boundaries without permission. Would you prefer they had requested transit permits while the Thalians faced extinction? Countered Jexel Representative Soraya, her scaled skin shifting colors with her emotions. Sometimes protocols must yield to moral imperatives. Trelvor remained silent, listening. When the Thalian distress signal had reached Ardani space, his government had sent formal regrets, the standard response to conflicts beyond their sphere of influence. Yet here they were, drawn inexorably toward the very crisis they had officially ignored. Ardani surveillance has been monitoring the situation, he finally said, quieting the room. What we've witnessed is unexpected. The humans employ technology far less advanced than ours, yet they've achieved remarkable results through innovation and adaptive tactics. He activated a holographic display showing footage from the first battle. Human ships performing maneuvers that should have torn them apart. Thalian technology repurposed in ways its creators never imagined. More remarkable still, Trelvor continued, is how they treat the Vakthar prisoners. Our analysts expected interrogation, perhaps torture. Instead, they provide comfort and medical care. The Moravian delegate's crystalline structure vibrated with skepticism. A strategic deception, surely. If so, they've maintained it consistently, Trelvor replied. Our deep space sensors detected something else of interest. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's continued response. Thousands of civilian volunteers boarding ships, massive resource mobilization, children collecting supplies for strangers they would never meet. They have no strategic interest in the Thalian system, Soraya observed. No political alliance, no valuable resources to claim as payment for their assistance. Precisely what troubles me, admitted the Moravian. Actions without obvious benefit defy rational analysis. As they approached Thalian space, a communication request arrived from Captain Rodriguez. The observation deck fell silent as her image appeared before them. Representatives of the Galactic Community, she began without preamble. Thank you for coming. The Vakthar Supreme Commander has agreed to diplomatic discussions, but we believe neutral witnesses would strengthen the legitimacy of any resolution. Ambassador Trelvor stepped forward. We did not come to intervene, merely to observe. Rodriguez's expression remained professionally neutral, but her eyes reflected something the Ardani found difficult to interpret, perhaps disappointment, perhaps understanding. Observation is a start, she replied. The discussion begins in 30 minutes. You're welcome to attend, as observers. When the transmission ended, Soraya addressed the group. Did anyone else notice she didn't ask for our help? They face overwhelming odds, yet they make no demands. Trelvor turned back to the viewport, where they could now see the massive Vakthar Armada positioned against the significantly smaller combined human-Thalian fleet. Perhaps that is why we feel compelled to give it anyway. In the diplomatic shuttle heading toward the designated neutral meeting point, Representative Soraya studied the additional data they had received about Earth. They are so young as a species, she marveled. Their first interstellar flight was barely a century ago. Their homeworld still bears scars from their developmental conflicts. Yet they travel 17 light-years to defend strangers, added Trelvor, while we, with all our advancement and supposed wisdom, sent only our regrets. As their shuttle approached the meeting station, they noticed something extraordinary. The Vakthar delegation had arrived, not in a warship as protocol would dictate, but in an unarmed diplomatic vessel. It was an unprecedented concession from a species known only for conquest. The humans have already achieved what we thought impossible, Trelvor murmured. They've made the Vakthar willing to talk. Supreme Commander Garvesh of the Vakthar Dominion stood rigid as the diplomatic shuttle approached the meeting station. His secondary hearts beat with controlled fury. The humans had forced this concession, not through superior firepower, but through something far more disturbing. They had introduced doubt into the Vakthar command structure. The planet killers remain in position, his second-in-command reminded him. If negotiations fail, we can still eliminate all resistance. Garvesh clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement, but his mind dwelled on the psychological reports from the captured warriors. Their neural patterns showed alarming changes after just days in human captivity. Not from torture or coercion, but from exposure to a social structure that functioned without dominance hierarchies. Supreme Commander, we're receiving an unusual transmission, the communications officer reported. It's being broadcast to all ships in the system, including ours. The view screen activated without command. Garvesh prepared to see Captain Rodriguez, or perhaps Admiral Okonkwo. Instead, the screen showed a Thalian hospital ward. Wounded beings from multiple species rested in adjacent beds, humans, Thalians, and most shocking of all, injured Vakthar warriors receiving identical care. The camera panned to show a small Thalian child approaching a Vakthar soldier, whose leg had been severely damaged in battle. The child carried what appeared to be a musical instrument, and without fear, began playing a gentle melody beside the wounded warrior. No words accompanied the transmission. None were needed. The scene shifted to the Thalian capital, where human engineers worked alongside local scientists to strengthen planetary defenses. Then to Earth, where thousands gathered in public spaces, holding vigils for a species most had never seen before today. Propaganda, hissed the second-in-command. Garvesh remained silent. The Vakthar understood propaganda. They used it extensively to maintain control of conquered territories. But this felt different. The transmission showed vulnerability, as well as strength, fear alongside courage. It felt authentic. As their shuttle docked with the meeting station, Garvesh received one final report. Junior officers across multiple ships had begun questioning the necessity of using planet killers against a species that had never shown aggression. Such questioning would normally be punished immediately. Instead, numerous command officers had reported listening to these concerns. The doubt was spreading. Inside the meeting chamber, representatives from across the galaxy had arranged themselves in a circular formation. Captain Rodriguez and High Counselor Venra sat side by side, equals in this negotiation despite the vast technological difference between their species. The galactic observers occupied elevated positions, their neutrality making them witnesses rather than participants. Garvesh entered with his delegation, noting how the humans watched them, not with fear or hatred, but with careful assessment. These were warriors who respected their enemies' capabilities. He could understand this. Supreme Commander, Rodriguez began, rising to acknowledge his rank appropriately. Thank you for agreeing to this discussion. The Vakthar Dominion does not typically negotiate with inferior forces, Garvesh responded, following protocol. But your tactics have proven noteworthy. Dr. Nazari stepped forward, her eyes meeting his compound gaze without flinching. We believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding between our cultures. The Vakthar expand through conquest because it's how you measure civilization's worth. The Thalians create rather than conquer. Humans do both, depending on necessity. Weakness disguised as philosophical choice, Garvesh countered, though without his usual conviction. Is it weakness? Nazari challenged, activating a holographic display showing Earth's history. Humans nearly destroyed ourselves through conflict before learning to balance strength with compassion. The Vakthar believe domination equals evolutionary success. Yet here we are, a younger species already capable of challenging your military might. Before Garvesh could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Admiral Okonkwo's voice cut through the noise. Multiple vessels dropping out of FTL near the planet killer platforms. They're firing on the Vokthar weapons. The diplomatic screen showed the astonishing sight. Ships from previously neutral species had bypassed the meeting entirely and taken direct action. They had made their choice. Garvesh turned to Rodriguez, mandibles spread in what humans might interpret as a smile. "It seems, Captain, your strategy extends beyond battlefield tactics." "Not my strategy," Rodriguez replied simply. "Just the natural outcome when you remind people of their better nature." 1 year after the Thalian distress signal, the observatory plaza overflowed with representatives from 27 species. The building itself had been redesigned, its original astronomical functions maintained, while new wings extended outward like crystalline arms embracing visitors from across the galaxy. Ambassador Liran, now serving as the head of the newly formed Mutual Cooperation Council, adjusted his formal attire nervously. Beside him, Captain Rodriguez, now Admiral Rodriguez, looked equally uncomfortable in her dress uniform. "I still believe you should be leading this ceremony," Liran whispered as they awaited the final delegates. Rodriguez shook her head. "This isn't about Earth or humans. It's about what we all decided to become together." The central dome above them displayed a real-time stellar map showing the home systems of all attending species connected by shimmering lines. Trade routes, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense pacts formed over the past year. At the center of this new network sat the Thalian system, once isolated and vulnerable, now a hub of interstellar cooperation. "They're ready for you," Dr. Nazari approached, having adapted smoothly from xenopsychologist to diplomatic coordinator. "And there's a surprise addition to the delegation." The main doors opened to admit the final group, the Vokthar representatives led by former Commander Rector. Since requesting asylum after the conflict, he had become an invaluable cultural bridge, helping both sides understand each other. Most surprising was his companion, Supreme Commander Garvesh himself, no longer in military regalia, but in the simple attire of a Vokthar diplomat. A murmur passed through the assembly. His presence wasn't part of the official program. As Liran stepped forward to begin the ceremony, Garvesh requested permission to speak. After a moment's hesitation, Liran nodded. For 10,000 cycles, the Vokthar dominion expanded through conquest. Garvesh's translator conveyed, "We measured civilization's worth through its ability to dominate. The Thalians, we believed, were weak. The humans, primitive." His compound eyes swept across the gathered delegates. "We were wrong." He gestured toward a group of Thalian and human children who had entered carrying seedlings from both worlds. Strength reveals itself in many forms. The Thalians showed strength through creation, the humans through protection. Together, they demonstrated that true power lies not in domination, but in cooperation. The children began distributing the seedlings to representatives from each world, a living symbol of the new accord. "The Vokthar High Command has authorized me to sign the Mutual Defense and Cultural Exchange Accord," Garvesh continued. "Not from defeat, but from recognition that evolution favors adaptation over aggression." As the formal signing commenced, Rodriguez found herself standing with High Counselor Venra at the observatory's private balcony. Below them, beings from worlds that had never before cooperated mingled freely. "Would you have believed this outcome when you sent your distress signal?" she asked. Venra watched as his daughter Mira performed a musical duet with a human child, their different instruments creating unexpected harmonies. "Never. We hoped merely to survive. Instead, we found a new way to live." From the gardens below rose hundreds of luminous Thalian memory lanterns, each carrying the name of someone lost in the conflict. Human, Thalian, and even Vokthar names ascended together into the night sky. "There will be more challenges," Rodriguez said, watching the lights rise. "Other threats, disagreements between member worlds, the usual complications of any alliance. But we'll face them together," Venra replied. "That's what you taught us." At the center of the garden stood the newly unveiled monument, a sculpture showing a human hand and a Thalian hand reaching toward each other across space. Its base contained soil from Earth, stone from Thalia, and metal from a Vakthar vessel, fused into a single foundation. The inscription, translated into 27 languages, read simply, "To those who answer when called, to those who stand beside strangers, to those who remind us what we can become." As night fell completely, the observatory's powerful telescopes activated, projecting a real-time image of distant Earth onto the dome. Cheers erupted from the human delegation at this gesture of respect. "Your world looks peaceful from here," Venra observed. "It wasn't always," Rodriguez smiled. "But we're working on it, just like everything else worth doing in this universe."